So, to say the least, 2024 has not been a good year for Star Wars, for Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, anybody else associated with this massive brand, by the way, that has been failing year after year, and this, most of all, is the biggest issue at hand. We know that Kathleen Kennedy is doubling down on her DEI agenda. We know that she wants to stay at Lucasfilm. She wants to extend her contract until 2027, regardless of a growing number of board members at Disney really calling for her to step down at Lucasfilm and to call it quits in 2024. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So, Leslye Headland, you guys may or may not know her, but she was the director, she was indeed the showrunner of the Acolyte series, the biggest failure over at Disney Star Wars. I would even go as far to say, yes, worse than The Last Jedi as a film. Now, what's interesting about this has a lot more to do with what's been going on between Leslye, the Disney executives, and everything else related to her overall outlook on the Star Wars fandom, rejecting anything to do with anything agenda-driven for Star Wars. Now, this is where things begin to pick up quite a bit because we know that we're in this second phase, quote-unquote, of everyone associated with Lucasfilm, those that worked on the Acolyte series, really going into full-on defensive mode about the current status of Star Wars after the sales disaster took place with the Acolyte merchandise, everything that has been going on, by the way, with Star Wars Outlaws as well. And even beyond that, there's a lot of people backing away from purchasing anything related to Star Wars. But what's interesting about this is the fact that with the Walt Disney Company going through multiple failures and challenges at the same time behind the scenes, one monumental development going on now has more to do with Leslye Headland, the director and showrunner of The Acolyte, who got very defensive after the most recent statistics related to the Star Wars sales disaster through a combination of Acolyte merchandise and Star Wars Outlaws sales that were actually abysmal, and among other statistics falling as we speak. Headland delivered the following. I thought it was outright wrong on how the studios reacted the way that they did with the merchandise related for the Acolyte. I really thought there were tons of demand there that fans would have eventually given some thought to. This is the very thing that happens with studio interference, and I do have a level of criticism toward Disney after they did what they did with all that wasted merchandise that was cancelled for a show as spectacular as the Acolyte. The way the fans reacted to my vision was absolutely disgusting, especially coming from grown adults who can't accept the fact that this is a show for women by women, but also, make no mistake, a show to teach men to accept a female-driven show in the right way that could be for them as well. That just wasn't the case. They wouldn't accept that, but I think it just hurt their ego, you know? And the rejection we dealt with the merchandise for the series and other forms related to the Star Wars brand, I really do believe was done out of spite. I stand with Kathy's opinion on the current status of this community that it is just so hard to please them and to present them with common sense. I have said this multiple times, but we have so many fans that would have supported merchandise for the Acolyte, and for the studios to take that chance away, I thought was the wrong move. A show like the Acolyte and the support we stand for with diversity, equity, and inclusion is the most important thing at Lucasfilm. It really is. Because if you can't gravitate toward every person to become a part of Star Wars, well, then you don't have a franchise. It was in my best interest to really make that the priority. But for fans to reject Kathy's vision of Star Wars, and for what she wants to do, I think it's just a major flaw in males that have been with this franchise for decades. They obviously don't get or understand that the times are changing and that there is growing support coming from the LGBTQ community, and they need to be supported in these shows and products in a more official way, you know? Now guys, let me just stop here for one moment. Now, this all comes well after the backlash that has been coming from the general public toward the LGBTQ stormtrooper that was displayed in one of the most recent Star Wars books, by the way. And by the way, Kathleen Kennedy wants to eventually do stuff like that in live-action form for series, movies, whatever it may be, she is doubling down on her efforts to actually make that happen in Star Wars. And that's what Leslye is basically alluding to here. She doesn't want to actually have LGBTQ representation done in a vague way anymore. She wants it done in a more full-on, direct way. And she's going to go on more about that in just a couple of seconds. Now, what's interesting about this is that this also comes after, like I said before, the sales disaster of the Acolyte series, Star Wars Outlaws, by the way, and among other elements related over at Lucasfilm and the Star Wars brand. You know, we already know that basically this franchise is falling apart before our very eyes in 2024. You know, we all saw what happened with the Acolyte series for, you know, a good 2.5 months that really solidified itself as one of the biggest failures under Disney. And when you look at what's about to happen with Skeleton Crew, look, I'm not all that impressed at all. Some people out there are going to give it a chance, and that's fine. Others out there believe it may be a change when it comes down to what Lucasfilm is about to represent. I just feel like it looks like nothing more than a Star Wars Galaxy's Edge commercial when watching that trailer. That's how I felt. But I digress. She goes on to conclude, we don't just want to hide their beliefs and how their characters are presented on screen. They deserve to express themselves freely on screen in whatever the way that they want to, and that's something Kathy is still working on right now. It's something that needs to be addressed in both film and television, and the last I talked with her, she is making sure that we'll continue at Lucasfilm, because that's their message. That is not to be confused with any kind of an agenda, because it flat out isn't. So she goes on to say that that's not an agenda, that displaying DEI full blast above proper storytelling is not an agenda. That is absolutely ludicrous. That is insane for anybody to say something like that. Now, this is Leslye Headland after all. It's not a big shocker. She was Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant. Yes, it always needs to be said and reminded, because there's a lot of people out there that don't know that fact, and that these are the types of people, by the way, that Lucasfilm tends to hire, that Kathleen Kennedy hires, fully knowing about their history, about their past in the film industry. That just goes to show you Kathleen Kennedy's character and how she runs the show over at Lucasfilm. It's why you have a lot of people working at Lucasfilm that really have no idea what they're doing. Now, this is where things begin to pick up, is that we know that Leslye was removed. She was fired from multiple Star Wars projects. We talked about that a couple of months ago. It's why she's not working on anything right now when it comes down to the Star Wars franchise, the universe, whatever have you. And it's basically a big storm at Lucasfilm between the studio heads at Disney, the Lucasfilm story group, some of the executives as well over at Lucasfilm, going against the Disney executives. It's really not a good sight right now. It's a very ugly sight when it comes down to Lucasfilm. They are in the worst spot right now, even worse than Marvel Studios, especially even regardless of the fact that Captain America 4's test screenings are abysmal as we speak. Still, to this day, Lucasfilm is by far the worst division over at the Walt Disney Company. I would like to hear what everyone has to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.